Good morning. Let's be silent before God. What is the source? Where is the beginning of original sin, the belief in good and evil? Where does it begin? Is it an impersonal universal force that has been operating in the human race since the early introduction of that belief in good and evil? That God could bless and curse? Or does it have an origin from either an angel or group of angels who decided they wanted to control the early race? Or is it just an impersonal force? Something that just appears out of nowhere and divides the consciousness of men into a belief in good and evil, which produces forms of good and evil. Does it really matter that we understand the source, if there's any source? Is it important for a teacher to know why a child puts down 2 times 2 equals 5? Or is it just important to correct that mistake and teach the child correctly that 2 times 2 is 4? Is 4. Many of you who are my friends in the metaphysical movement are probably going to be upset with me by what God is going to reveal now through my lips. But I only tell you this in order to help, not hurt, in order to lead forth. That's the word educate, not dictate. So you're free, as all of us are, to believe or not to believe anything that's said by any man of God or woman of God or anyone who claims to be a teacher and therefore has authority in the consciousness and in the lives of those who are listening to that particular teacher. We were never meant as metaphysical students to take, at any point in time, any statement ever made and make it the unchangeable, infallible Word of God. The Bibles of the world should be open books in which the Spirit in every man of every religion speaks and comes forth in gems of wisdom, perfection of knowledge that is exactly the appropriate thing to be said, thought, and done at that particular moment in history, until such time as every man going through whatever process, whether it's reincarnation or whatever the method is after death, and no one can actually say what he knows and be an honest teacher. None of us have ever died. That's why I've always said to my friends, the ones who've died and passed on are better off than we, because they know, they experience what happens next. Yes, there are those who claim that they can remember their previous past lives, and that's fine. I've never been able to have that gift, but I don't deny that it's possible for others. I'm taking a long time to get to this point. It is important that we know, metaphysicians, the source of evil, that we understand where evil comes from. that we are clear that it is not an impersonal force that just happened to show up one Sunday morning. Evil is the choice that sometimes very advanced metaphysicians have made to use their knowledge of spiritual principles to control and dominate other people. Now, whether you call this group of people angels, fallen angels, they may be. It doesn't really matter. Angels, I have some friends say that angels just another word for alien beings from other planets. I do not care at this point whether they're angels flying around with wings or in spaceships, nor do I care if they're men and women who have, or even children that have gone through experiences, perhaps lifetime after lifetime, that have led them into spiritual truth, and they use this knowledge for control of other people. It doesn't really matter. But to deny ever that individuals like Adolf Hitler, Mao Zedong, Mussolini, Genghis Khan, other persons of history have worked and wreaked evil upon the lives of untold millions of people out of a desire to control and dominate others around them, is to bury your head in metaphysical sand and not to understand what actually is going on, and to make a mockery of the suffering of those who've been under the domination of these evil forces and evil men. It is to make a mockery of every soldier who's given his life in defense of liberty and democracy, and out of love has laid his life down, sometimes out of a draft card, but most of the time some of the great soldiers that we don't have written record of have put themselves in front of bullets and grenades, not because the draft card told them to, but because some force of love caused them to lay down their lives for their brothers. That is God, by the way, God in action. For you to understand the history of the United States, if you don't understand the source of a lot of our problems today, the Civil War, Reconstruction, then you don't understand the history of this country. For you to understand the source of original sin, where it began, for you to understand that source, you have to understand that there was, let's call it an angelic rebellion, but it doesn't have to be angels or aliens. It could be just a group of men and women, even children, that have been reincarnated over and over again to the point where they understand spiritual principles and use their knowledge to control and dominate those around them. And they pay the price, because you see, the law of God is very clear. What a man sows, a man reaps. If a man is sowing forth lies, then he's a victim of the lie that he sows. If a man's purpose in life is to control, dominate, and use other people, then at some point he will experience that in his own life, because there's always somebody that's lived one life more and has a little bit more knowledge than you. And if your desire is to control other men for your own human will, human lust, human ambition, then indeed you will be involved in that scenario, not by a hand of God, by the hand of God, but by your own decisions, by your own character that's been out pictured. When you look at the Federal Reserve Bank and you see people going to work with dollars that are continually being devalued by the printing of more money, the control that they have over our lives is unconscionable, immense, and unbelievably unfair. Every American family that goes to make a mortgage payment, it takes 23 years to pay just the interest. They take the interest first on those loans, and then you have about 3 to 7 years to pay off the principal before you become a homeowner. That's a perfect example of control in this country. And it's not right. If you took $1,000 house payment and applied 500 toward principal and 500 toward interest, Americans would be homeowners instead of being thrown out into the streets homeless. That is unconscionable. It's a matter of control. You go back through the history of banking. You don't understand how this arrived until you understand the history of banking. Nor will you understand the history of original sin unless you understand the angelic rebellion. The fact that a group of angels, aliens, or men and women developed a system for controlling the mind of man and causing that consciousness that God gave men, that undivided consciousness that is a reflection of His perfection, His omnipotence, His omnipresence, until you understand that the mind of Christ does not entertain the belief in good and evil, and that your salvation lies in moving into the mind of Christ appearing as Jesus and other great men who understand that the mind is the substance of all form, and the mind, when divided into a belief in good and evil, falls. A house divided against itself will not stand. Until you understand these things and where they come from, other beings, sons of God, who are using this knowledge of the mind being the substance of all form and using it to control you by giving you the belief in good and evil, a Bible that's arranged to make you believe in a God that is both good and evil, a God that both blesses and curses. Where did this come from? Go back to your history. It's the early Roman Catholic Church, where a group of cardinals got together and decided that they would put together a book of both the Old and the New Testament, thereby diluting the perfection of the Christ who always blesses, who always loves, the Christ who is universally intact, the Christ who never entertains a belief in good and evil, the Christ who would never dream of blessing and cursing or creating a heaven and a hell, the Christ who would never dream of forming judgment days and white throne judgments, the Christ who never judges but came into the world for the purpose of saving the world. That Christ then is put into the Old Testament, knit together in 66 books, with the book of Deuteronomy, where you see God is pictured as blessing and cursing. You cannot understand the source of original sin until you understand the angelic, or call it alien, or call it whatever you want to call it, rebellion, the deliberate use of the mind of Christ for personal gain by dividing the mental house of others. It is important that you understand that these beings exist, that there are men and women who choose evil, who choose deliberately the wrong course of action in order to advance their personal interest and control and use others. To deny this would be made a mockery of those who have suffered under these people, or the lives of those soldiers who've laid down their lives to destroy that cancer wherever it appears. Now, I know the metaphysicians are saying there is no cancer. Everything is perfect and hunky-dory. Well, that's true at the absolute level of consciousness. But unfortunately, there's only one that I know of that always lived in that absolute level of consciousness, and that was the Christ as experienced and lived by Jesus. Can we attain it? Yes. Will we attain it today? In part. Will all human beings in the future attain it? I pray so. Are we on the right path, looking toward the top of the mountain and knowing that we can someday arrive and stay there? Yes, we know we're on the right path. That God is altogether good, altogether and infinitely present at all times, that His mind is not divided, that He doesn't bless and curse. And it's our job to get there, and we will. But we must understand the source of those who would keep us from attaining the very heights themselves.